Welcome to Your Schools on Community 7 Television. I'm Shoots Veis and I'm your host. Each month we look at a different aspect of what's going on in Billings Public Schools. This month we're very excited to have Casey Visser with us. Casey is a history teacher out at the Career Center. Casey, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, we're going to talk all about history and Career Center and all that kind of good stuff. But before we get into that, let's get a little bit of your background. Did you grow up in the area? Did you come to the area? Tell us your history.
So I was born in Utah. We moved up here when I was 6 months old. So I am a product of Billings Public Schools. Yeah. Went to Burlington, Will James, and West High.
All right.
So yeah, I've lived here my whole life.
Yep. And then kind of when did you decide, education's something I want to get into, and kind of walk us through how you got into the field?
So education was always really valued in my home. My dad was director of HRDC for 30 years. So social studies, history was always, politics were a big deal.
Sure.
Then 8th grade, had a wonderful history teacher named Phil Hoffman at Will James. And that's when I decided, hey, this is something I want to do.
Yeah. So you went to school for it, and how did you kind of get recruited into Billings Public Schools? Did you start here? Did you start somewhere else? How did that
go? I graduated in '99 and the sub for a year, got a long term out at Laurel, and then I was working for the Parks Department, plugging in sprinklers.
Yeah.
I got a call Friday before school started on Monday. There was an opening at Lewis and Clark. Hadn't shaved for like a week. So ran home and cleaned up and went and fortunately got the position, and here I am.
So talk to us a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about Career Center and what goes on out there. But prior to that, you were out at Lewis and Clark. How long were you out there? What were you teaching
20
out
years. American history. Just a great school, great memories. Did student council out there, coached basketball, just all kinds of things. Really tough decision when I decided to move to high school because I just love middle school, but just ready for a change.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. So then you moved out to the Career Center. What have you been teaching out there? Tell us a little bit.
American history, but the great thing is I get to do the whole thing. 8th grade, we kind of stop around Civil War, Reconstruction era, where junior year, you get to do the whole survey. Sure. So dealing with juniors, 16, 17-year-olds. Talk
to us a little bit about the Career Center and the history department out there. What is it? What's special about the Career Center? Then talk to us about what's special about the Career Center, and then let's loop back into how the social studies department fits into that mission of the Career Center.
The Career Center, I think kids come out there because of the career and technical education, the engineering, the automotive, the nursing, whatever. But the academic programs are so strong as well. So I think they may come out for automotive, but if they love their history class, that's a win.
Sure.
It's just a really great environment. I always love taking like the 8th grade tours out to Career Center. I'm like, that's a cool place.
Yeah.
And it is. It's just kids choose to be out there, and it kind of shows.
Yeah. So how does the history department then? Okay, I want to go out there because I'm interested in automotive or engineering or whatever. So why does there need to be a history department?
Just to balance the schedule, because most of those classes are like 2 hours, and then they need a core class to take.
Sure.
Most of our kids are half-time students. They'll either come in the morning or the afternoon. Some of them are full-time.
Sure.
So I mean, they just need to get their requirements out of the way.
Yeah.
But again, I've had so many kids say, "Wow, this is the first history class I've really enjoyed." And so if we can hook them with academics, that's a win for everybody.
How many people are in the history department? And
there's only 4 of us.
And what classes are then offered?
Sure, just world history, American history, psychology, and government. We do have dual credit options as well. My buddy Dave Jones does a dual credit U.S. history. I think Frank Kimkis is offering a dual credit government next year. So there are we're looking at AP potentially.
Sure. Yeah.
Similar to what you get in the high school.
Yeah, so I mean, kind of what I'm trying to drive at here is that, the reason there's a math department and a social studies department and an English department out there is those are still core classes
Absolutely.
that kids absolutely have to have.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so if they can get that with their career and technical education, all the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know you do have some students that are part-time, but you also have some students who are full-time
Absolutely,
out there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Do you know what the breakdown in the mix is between the part-timers and the full-timers?
I'm not sure. I know we're huge next year. We're really growing, which is super exciting. Yeah. So obviously we're offering something that students want.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about this last school year. Were you in the building, online, and what was it like kind of teaching during the pandemic, and how was that different?
So I was physical, live in the building. It took some getting used to. I mean, just the uncertainty, of the fall was with all of us. 2-hour blocks were challenging. There's a lot of benefits to them as well. The masks were an issue, but we got used to them. Yeah. So, it was challenging. It was a big year. I decided to grade some AP U.S. history work during my prep. I also teach with Digital Academy, so I was a very busy year. But I feel like I did a good job. I'm proud. We all got through this.
So let's do a little compare and contrast.
Yeah.
The year before, you have the 6-period schedule. You're going to see those kids every week.
Yep.
This last year with the pandemic, we switched that around.
Right.
And you're seeing the kids every other week, but for a 2-hour block. How did you, as a teacher, then have to change what you're doing in the classroom to accommodate those changes?
You can't say, hey, remember this. I mean, you really have to spend more time reviewing.
Yeah.
But in terms of the 2 hours, you had more time to really dig into topics. Activities were easier to fit into that time frame. So really pros and cons.
Yeah. Did you find that the kids really did need that? Well, I haven't seen you in a week, so the first 30 minutes we're gonna review.
I tried to really be effective with my planning to try to wrap up little mini units or So they did need more review, but they also had more time to complete their work. I heard that a lot. Kids love not having as much homework.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm sure next year it'll be change, getting back to normal.
What were some of the most difficult things that you ran into over the course of the year?
Having kids quarantined, kids contact trace, kids, missing. But in terms of technology, Google Classroom, kind of saves our behinds with that stuff.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit that. I'm assuming that's probably one of the benefits that you've had coming out of that pandemic. And then how are you going to use that going forward? Okay, let's just say for sure next fall, hey, everything's back to normal. This is same old school year that we're all used to. What has changed in your classroom that you implemented during the pandemic and said, man, that's fantastic?
Again, just the Google Classroom, where if you do miss, you can hop onto my classroom and figure out, hey, this is what I need to do. I link everything on there. It's pretty much my lesson plan. So that's super handy. Just not taking school for granted. The kids who obviously were in person chose to be there. It didn't have a lot of discipline issues this year. It was the kids were really great.
Sure. Yeah. So when a school year begins, and I know this is probably a little bit different, middle school to high school in your subject, but how do you kind of assess where the kids in your class are, and that diversity on the spectrum? How do you kind of assess that at the beginning of the year, saying, here's where my kids are, and I know where we're going? So how do you assess that in the beginning?
It's so hard because the last U.S. history class they've taken is 8th grade. So I'm kind of unique because I've taught that for years, and now I get to kind of carry the baton forward. I like to give them questions off the citizenship test, the naturalization test that immigrants have to take to become U.S. citizens. Kind of a good baseline of what they know. Just a lot of discussion, just a lot of kind of reviewing what they supposedly got in 8th grade.
Yeah. And then how do you take that information and incorporate that over the course of the year to say, okay, I know where you need to be at the end of the year. How do you get them from A to B over the course of the year?
The tough thing with history is it's so broad. I mean, and I don't want to just quiz the kids on trivia, So I really focus on teaching them kind of historical thinking skills. So that's kind of my big, broad, year-long project. And then at the end of the year, I like to do some kind of project, a debate, a mock trial, something to show those skills off.
Yeah. Are there certain milestones you're hitting over the course of the year, making sure the kids are understanding this topic? Or
absolutely. But again, we go back to, for example, contingency. That's one of the historical thinking skills. Just to really hammer home that with history, there's no like ending. You know, the people going through it don't know the ending, I guess is what I'm trying to say. They're kind of making it up as they go, just like we are.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, just to remind kids of those things, historical context, you know, change over time, kind of these big, you know, historical skills.
And then what do you do at the end of the year to see where the kids are at and how well
you know,
they've done?
This year we did a mock trial / debate on whether or not we've met our American ideals, which are laid out in the Declaration, you know, democracy, opportunity, you know, et cetera. It was great. The kids had different jobs and really fascinating, because then they can kind of play with all the content they've learned, and it's great.
Yeah. And then when they're moving on from your class, what are you setting them up for the next? What is the next class they need to take, and how are you setting them up for that?
So next class will be U.S. government, and obviously we talk a lot about government you know, early in the year, and then they take a social studies elective, you know, psychology, sociology, economics. But again, I think these critical thinking skills will translate into the next level.
Yeah.
So hopefully they're using, you know, the material I'm teaching them, and they can apply it even more, you know, in a U.S. government class.
Sure. What type of technology are you using in your classroom? I know we've already talked about Google Classroom, so you don't get to talk about that.
Okay.
You're going to have to move on. Give us 2 or 3 other technologies that
you're
using in your classroom.
My tech guy, Gerald, a great guy, he said I was getting a new monitor. So I come in and it's a huge big screen TV.
Yeah.
So it's a smart TV, a smart board. So that's been great to mess around with. The kids are fortunate; they all have a Chromebook in my class. So we have a Chromebook cart. So yeah, we're online all the time, looking at primary documents, annotating. Yeah, you know, different review things, Kahoot, quizzes, different things, just to kind of review.
Over the course of your career, how have you seen that technology? You know, how does it enhance? How does it enhance how the way you're able to teach?
I started with an overhead, man. me and the overhead marker, and that was as interactive as it got.
Yeah,
so
you were writing the declaration.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So it's come so far.
Yeah.
And I'm just, you know, I wonder where we're going to be 20, 30 years in the future.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. You know, but I read a great book. It's by the Stanford History Education Group. You know, why learn history if I can look up everything I need to know on my cell phone?
Sure, yeah.
So I'm very cognizant of that. It's like, okay, I have to offer the kids something other than what they can, you know, put into Google.
Yeah, and so have you noticed your teaching style change because of that? Because, you know, when you started, you weren't able to Google that, right?
Right.
And now I can Google that. Okay, well, does that mean that I need to teach history differently so that they see it differently than I can just type it in? And
I think so. I think it's less about me as I get older and try to put more on them. And again, you can't know everything about history. You know, it's just kind of trying to bring it alive to them, give them a love for the subject.
Sure.
You know, when they're older, they can, you know, go to historic places and
do you get to, you know, bring up videos of the Martin Luther King speech?
Absolutely.
Or, you know, some of those type of things that maybe you had access to at the beginning of your career, but probably would have been pretty difficult to...
Absolutely. Showing clips all the time.
Yeah.
You know, especially when you get into more modern history. You know, here's Nixon's resignation speech. You don't have to. I don't have to tell them about it. You can. They can watch it.
Sure. Do you find that a lot of your students have seen some of this stuff already, or is this still somewhat new to them?
Pretty new to them. It really depends. You know, I think, as I said earlier, if history was kind of, you know, valued and really talked about in their home, it's different. But a lot of them, it's brand new. I mean, they've kind of heard of things like Watergate in Vietnam, but maybe don't know a lot, which is great.
Yeah.
You know.
How do you work with those kids? I'm sure you have students who are really good with technology, and you have some that are probably not so good with technology.
You know, just patience.
Yeah.
I think that was a tough thing with COVID. Is I like kids to help each other. That's kind of hard when you're trying to, you know, social distance and stuff at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
Just patience and you know, treating them like humans. You know.
Tell us what is a typical day like in your classroom from beginning to end? What does it look like?
Changing activities a lot. So we start a class with a question of the day, kind of a competition with all my classes. They get donuts if they win for the month.
Yeah.
So current events, question of the day. Then we get in current events discussion. I always tell them, you know, the news is kind of your first draft of history.
Yeah.
And then changing activities. Lots of primary source work, especially with older kids. video clips, discussions, activities. So really try not to lecture more than 15 minutes, 20 minutes at a time.
Sure. Are you testing them or doing assessments to them, different than, oh, hey, this is the multiple choice?
Absolutely.
How has that changed, and how do you do it now?
Again, I'm talking about the Stanford group a lot. They have these beyond the bubble assessments, which kids are given a primary source, and it's not even necessarily what we're studying, and they've got to use these historical thinking skills to make sense of it. So much more of that stuff.
Okay.
Lots of essays, persuasive,
Sure.
argumentative essays.
And then how are you thinking about when you're grading those? What are you looking for in those essays? What type of things are you wanting to pull out of them?
Claim, reason, evidence. Your claim is, hey, answer the question. What's your basic reason? And then mainly, I'm looking for historical evidence.
Sure.
I always tell the kids, if you disagree with me, that's great. Just provide the evidence to back up your ideas.
Sure. And do you see those skills evolve over the course
Yes,
of the year?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So it has changed a lot. I think we're moving away, hopefully, from the rote memorization, the dates, just memorizing names.
Right, and moving away from that model of, well, you do need to know that date because there isn't a Google. Well, you know what?
Yeah.
Chances are I don't really need to know exactly what that date is because I can Google it, but how do I put that into context?
Right, yeah, exactly. And there's that keyword is context.
Yeah, absolutely. What is one thing you wish that students understood about learning history?
Oh, great question.
Yeah.
Again, it's human. I think we forget that. I think for a lot of people, even adults, it's this dry, dusty subject, and the ending's written, and it's, When you have historical empathy, when you try to put yourself in these people's position, I mean, it's fascinating.
Are you able to use some maybe dramatic recreations or things like that to help put that finer point on some of the things that you guys are doing?
Absolutely. Try to, when we're reading a primary source, ask for volunteers to kind of, bring it to life. And the English department reads a lot of historical novels, so we try to tie in with them as much as we can as well. Do
you have a teacher kind of in the English department that you were that has a lot of the same students and you guys are?
Absolutely. Wanda Morales, Dan Charlton, great. They do a lot of juniors as well.
Sure.
Just great educators. So we're bouncing ideas off each other a lot.
So what type of kind of books are you guys working on together?
For example, Wanda came to me and said, when are you doing Vietnam? Because I want to do, what they carried in their pockets.
Sure.
And so we kind of set that up. And then one of my buddies, Jerry Reaver, longtime history teacher here, I was able to come in and talk. He's a Vietnam vet.
Oh, sure.
Just trying to, as much as we can, pull things together.
Sure. What is one thing you wish parents understood about what their students are learning in history?
I just to take their kids to historical places if they can, to watch historical films if they can. Don't turn the channel when there's a documentary on.
Yeah.
Even if they maybe had a poor experience in a history class, just to open, be open to the subject.
Sure. And then what do you find to be some of the I will promise you we'll get to a more sunny side of this question.
Yeah.
What do you find to be the least rewarding or most difficult part of teaching history?
I'm a pretty sunny guy. So, boy, it's, I guess there's political pressure nowadays. What version of history you're teaching.
Yeah.
I think the politics becomes tricky sometimes.
Sure.
But again, I think that claim, reason, and evidence, that works real well. Just present your evidence and we're in good shape.
Sure. So the other side of that coin is then what do you find to be some of the most rewarding aspects of
kids are awesome.
Yeah.
And really to hang out with really cool people and get to talk about stuff I'm passionate about. It doesn't feel like I'm working.
Yeah, absolutely.
And every year I get to different eras in history. I'm like, wow, this is my favorite. And then I get to the next era. No, this is good, because I dive in with the kids because there's always more to learn.
Sure. Now with the Career Center model, and you have some of those students that are coming and going from their home schools.
Right.
I imagine you have some students one semester and not the other.
Yep.
I mean, give me a sense of, Is it 50% of the kids you have over and over? Is it 20%? What is the percentage that you see from first semester to second semester?
You know, Rhonda and Darshoff really do a great job for us trying to get us with the same kids as much as possible. So I would say percentage-wise, I get to keep most of them, which is great. That is hard to lose them because with 8th grade, you know, I taught the same kids all year.
Right.
But it is kind of cool to get, you know, new kids second semester and try to, you know, make a relationship with them as well.
And how do you try to keep that continuity with the, okay, this kid comes over from Skyview, and first semester they were up at Skyview and they had first semester history up there. Their schedule worked it out, and you know what, now they have Mr. Visser for second semester history. It's just the way the schedule worked out. How do you try to keep that continuity between their homeschool and what you're going to teach them second semester?
Well, you know, I think district-wide we're trying really hard to be on a kind of similar pace. You know, so first semester we kind of wrap up with the Great Depression. And we start second semester with World War II. So if everyone can kind of get to that ending spot, then we're in business.
Have you had students where you're kind of, you know what, the teacher tried, but they just did not get there? And
yeah, absolutely.
And do you try to have to fill in those pieces? Or?
You know, part of my classes we're always reviewing. You know, it's not like, okay, we're done with the Gilded Age, we're never going to talk about it again. So yeah, you just, you know, you can do that playing little games, you know, stuff like that. But so, yeah, some of those kids need a little more of a refresher.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you want to create the, you know, the climate in your class where a kid's okay saying, hey, I don't remember the Gilded Age. Can you go over that?
Yeah. Okay. And then how do you, in the context of history, you know, you've got your world history and you've got your American history. You know, one is 50,000 years, and
broad,
one is 200 years. How do you, you know, kind of make that change between going for something that's so wide into something that's narrow? Because they're going to come to you from the world history, where they've covered, you know, 200 years is probably a couple of paragraphs. And now you've got a whole year to do 200 years.
You know, I'm an American history guy. You know, I just always preface it with that. I mean, it is a challenge, but if they kind of have that big 30,000 you know foot view, then we can really narrow in. I still think American history in a year is such a rush. Because we don't get it. You know, I'm used to spending a month on the Revolution. I get a few days. You know, in 11th grade.
What if you could wave a magic wand? What section of American history would you like to be able to spend more time on?
My gosh, I don't even know. They're all so, I mean, it's like my kids almost, you know. And this later stuff that I hadn't got a chance to teach in middle school, it's just fascinating. The 1960s, for example, oh my gosh, so much happening.
And how far into history are you expected to get by the end?
You know, we're in modern day. We did it. I did it this year. So
I think the one that's probably the most fascinating to me, of course, we can set a moment in time on September 11th, right? And you know where you were. And,
yes, absolutely.
And I mean, that is a marker in your life. There was the before this, and there was after this, and there are things. This happened in my life before this, and this happened in my life after this. And your students now do not have that marker.
They do not. To them, 9/11 is just another historic event. Just like Gettysburg or whatever.
But they probably really do know people. They may have maybe have an older sibling, or their parents were well affected by it. What do you see when you come to that moment in time with your students now? And how does it start to become that stuff become a little more real to them?
You know, what I did this year is I showed them footage from the news that morning as it was unfolding, and they hadn't seen that. They hadn't seen the second plane fly in, and I'm sure you're familiar with the Billy Joel song, We Didn't Start the Fire. So we did a little project with that, and then we did another one where they had to pick events from their lifetime. Just to hammer home the fact that they've lived through a tremendous amount of history already. So they'd have to pick certain events and research them. You know, again, it's just this idea that, you know, history doesn't look like it when you're living through it. It's just your life. It's, you know. My memory of 9/11 is my sister was sick with blood clots. She's fine, but it was a personal thing, right? So real life is happening at the same time as all these historic things too.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting thing to look at. I mean, and like I said, now that now that there's a little gray hair up there, you
Yeah,
do,
yeah,
you do
right,
have
right,
a few of these things to look
right,
back on.
right.
Whereas I'm sure when I was a junior in high school, that would have been 100 miles away, and not something that you do on a regular basis.
But if you can start making those connections, I think it's powerful.
Are you able to at all? Okay, now that you get to that point where there's some history that they've lived, to jump back a little bit and do that. Okay, well, I want you to have some historical empathy for the things that happened. Are you able to jump back and make those connections?
So that last project of the year, this did we meet our founding ideals? The kids were assigned a historical era. So if you're like American Revolution guy, you'd be the witness that would come up and share information about the American Revolution. So trying to tie all of it together.
Stare into your crystal ball a little bit. I know that history has probably, how you teach history has changed a lot in 20 plus years of teaching. What do you see coming the next 3 to 5 years that are maybe going to be even different than what you're doing right now?
I mean, technology is going to continue to change, and we'll have to keep up with that. It's fascinating. I mean, I think the Career Center is going to continue to grow. I mean, one of my professional developments years ago, this guy was talking about fresh mind, how every lesson you go into, even if you've taught it 100 times, you have to have that fresh mind, that fresh perspective. So I try to keep that in my teaching, right? So hopefully I want to keep that, and when I don't have that, I think it's time to retire.
All right, absolutely. How are you able to, being at the Career Center with a focus on career and technical education, are you able to weave some of that into your history lessons? And here's the thought that I have. Okay, you have students out there in an automotive class. Are you able to, weave the history of the automobile into stuff that you're doing? Are there other examples of that you're able to, because you're at a Career Center with career and technical education, weave some of that into your history
I want to do even more. I really had grand plans of doing a lot of guest speakers. Obviously COVID kind of put the kibosh on that. I want to do more of that. Lots of choice when I give projects. A lot of automotive kids fascinated with the Ford company and Henry Ford, and I want to give them an avenue to explore that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Casey, thanks so much for coming in and visiting with us.
Thank you.
It's been great. I know it's been a difficult year to be an educator, so thank you for all that you do.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And thanks for having me.
I know you love having the kids out there, but I know they love having you too.
Oh, thank you, man.
All right. Thanks, Casey.
Thanks, Shoots.